Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Statham and I am the 4-H and Adult Agriculture Educator with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Rensselaer County. I am back again today with another video, and this one is on one of my favorite in-school programs to deliver, worms and composting. So this is a vermiculture composting program that gives kids the opportunity to get hands-on with these creepy crawlers. So I love it. I have the kids who want to be very hands-on and to hold the worms, and I have the kids who are running across the room because they don't want to be near them. However, once they kind of get up close and they touch them, they're fine. It just may take a minute. So the total run time for this program is usually about 30 to 45 minutes, and that is with some time in there for questions, especially when I get towards the end with composting. I do tend to get quite a few questions. When we break for experiments, I guess I should start at the beginning. We start together as a group. We go through the anatomy of an earthworm, the life cycle of the earthworm. Then we break out into groups. I usually have groups of 4 or 5, depending on how many students I have. And this is when we go through our different experiments that I will walk you guys through in a little bit. And then we come back together as a whole group to go about composting. So first things first is the anatomy of a worm. Very simple. You have your head end, which is where the mouth is located, segments, the clitellum or the saddle, which is that thick band, and then the tail end. That's it. You can add a few more terms and you can go into the anterior end, which is your head end, the posterior end, which is the tail end, the dorsal side, which is the back of the worm, and the ventral side, which is the stomach. Those are very hard to tell apart, but at least with the anterior end and the posterior end, you can tell the difference because where the saddle is, it is located closer to the head end of the worm. So after that, we go into the life cycle of the worm. And luckily, I don't have to spend as much time on this part, as well as kind of going through the different habitats or the habitat that the worm lives in, just because teachers have kind of already gone through this, as well as their importance in the environment. So again, just briefly going through that an earthworm hatches from a cocoon. The earthworm lays cocoons throughout the year, especially when the soil is warm and wet. The baby earthworm grows inside the protective case called the cocoon, and how there are many eggs inside that cocoon and not just one worm. That the hatchlings wiggle out of the cocoon and dig into the soil right away, and how they are ready to venture out into the world as soon as they're born. So usually the analogy I use in classrooms is, you guys know how your parents take care of you from birth, since the get-go. Well, with worms, it is different. As soon as they're born, they are ready to just take care of themselves and go into the soil. So after that, we finally get to be scientists. So again, this could be someone's first station, it could be someone's last. But what we're doing at this station is general observations. So the kids are just kind of looking at the worm, seeing how it moves. They can touch it, see how it feels. If they're feeling venturous, they can pick it up and do the same thing and just kind of get a closer look. I usually don't have magnifying glasses. If you do, great, use it. We also use this time to kind of go through the anatomy of the worm, how you can kind of see the segments of the worm as it moves, and seeing if they can figure out the head end versus the tail end. And if I back up my video just a little bit and kind of zoom in here. So where this discoloration is, and it's kind of big right here, is the clitellum. And again, that is located more towards the head end. Usually when we do this part of the experiment, we do it with earthworms and not red wigglers, just because they are bigger. However, today, this is all I had, so it's a little harder to tell, but I am almost positive that that is the saddle. So once I get out of that, the next station. Do they prefer wet or dry environments? So this is very simple. You just take a paper towel, and we usually have cups that are already filled with water. So when the kids are ready, they will pour it on the side that says wet, and then just kind of wait for the worms. For each station, I usually have about 5 minutes. So it is very difficult, but 9 times out of 10, the worms do move to the wet side. So next we have light or dark. And so this is when you can briefly talk about the type of environment that worms prefer to live in. So when doing wet or dry, is the soil that they're usually in, is it typically damp or is it very, very dry? And again, the worms move to the wet side, kind of showing them how, like, what the soil type is. And the same with light or dark. When the worms are down in the soil, is there a lot of light getting through or is it a very dark place? And so this experiment is very easy. You just take an Amazon box. I just took one that I had lying around. And I added nice little things that said light and dark. As you can tell, it is kind of dinged up just because I have taken this in and out of schools for the last year or so. So once we continue, you can use a divider and put the divider inside the box. You just have to make sure that it is not touching the bottom of the box, because what you're doing is you have a hole cut in the top of one side of the box. And then what you are going to do is you are going to take a flashlight. It does also work with your phone light, and just shine it in on one side. Again, it's very hard when you only have 5 to 6 minutes for the experiment. But again, 9 times out of 10, some of the worms, and we usually put a few in there, are trying to get away from the light. So some have actually started to move towards the dark side. Some have actually somehow gotten under the flaps of the box. So you do have to be careful of that you may have a worm or two trying to escape through holes that are found in the box. So after we are little scientists, we come back together and we talk about composting, what you can do with the composting, especially when you have a garden. Talking about what you can and cannot put in your compost. So you want to put in like your apple and banana peels or eggshells and ground coffee, but you don't want to put any type of meat in there. No bread, no branches, no plastic, anything like that. And if you have an in-home compost, like the one I'm about to show you in a minute, that if you have pets, making sure that you do not put pet feces in your compost bin as well. So setting up a compost bin, very easy. And a huge thank you to Angela Ross Hickson, who's been my 4-H volunteer from the get-go with this program. She let me borrow her personal compost bin and then gave me this one already put together that I can now take into classrooms. And the plan is to kind of leave them there with the classes for the week so they can kind of make additional observations. They can put in maybe 2 different types of items. So for example, eggshells and ground coffee, or peppers, anything like that, and seeing if the worms prefer one item over the other. So if I start the video, just very, very easy, just a bin that you can pick up from Walmart. You want to make sure that you've got vents kind of put in just so you want proper airflow through the compost. And then you can see there's a lot of torn up newspaper. I've got my coffee grounds. I've got eggshells from breakfast that I made a couple days ago. If you move stuff around, you can kind of see some of the creepy crawlers, some of the worms, and things like that. So when we are at this part of the program, this is when we kind of talk about your carbon and nitrogen breakdown. So your carbons are your browns, so your straw, leaves, wood chips, things like that. And then your nitrogens, which are your greens, so grass clippings, vegetable scraps, your coffee grounds, things like that. And then going through how you need to make sure there's moisture in your compost. So sprinkling water in there or using damp paper towel or newspaper. Just because the organisms need it. However, if it is too wet, that the organisms may run out of oxygen. And how oxygen, of course, is your air, and your organisms need it to breathe and survive. And how the organisms in the compost are aerobic, meaning that they require H2O to digest the waste. And then how you can use the waste from the compost from your gardens in schools or back at home. So after all of that, I've got a few additional resources for you guys, so you can feel free to send me an email, which I will have my contact at the very end of this presentation, if you want copies of these or just if you have questions about them. So additional resources that you can do are kind of going through the different creatures besides the worms that you could find in your compost, or how to set up a compost in your classroom, which would be something similar to what I have here in my apartment. And then if you actually have a backyard or more land, that there are different types of compost, and you can kind of gear it towards where you were located. So again, I'm in an apartment, so I need to have a small bin that I can just keep. Whereas if you are outside, you can maybe have big bins set up. And then aside from the additional resources, how there are additional activities. So I've got a compost project record, or for the younger kids, like a little coloring activity where they can kind of color the worm, and then it asks questions of what do you think the worm would feel like, or how do you think it moves, and just additional things like that. So again, feel free to contact me if you want copies of the handouts or the additional materials that I showed in the PowerPoint. If you have any questions about the experiments or anything that I said today, or if you have general composting or vermiculture composting questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is down at the bottom. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's experiments. If you guys get the chance to do this, please send me pictures or videos of you guys doing it at home. I'd love to see your different compost, and if you've decided to do anything different with the experiments, or add any experiments, I would love any ideas. So again, thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.